All right, let's jump right into it. We're going to break down an event that literally sent shockwaves across the globe, an event that's forcing everyone to question the very rules of international power and law.
So here are the cold, hard facts. January 3rd, 2026. A sitting head of state, Nicolas Maduro, is taken by foreign forces in his own country. Now here's the thing. What you call this action, well, that changes absolutely everything that comes next.
So what was it? Was this an arrest? A legitimate law enforcement action just on a global scale? Or was it a kidnap? A flat-out illegal violation of national sovereignty? And believe me, the words we choose here, they're not just words. They are the entire battleground for this conflict.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the event itself. Then, the messy legal conflict it kicked off. We'll analyze it as a pure show of force, explore the chaotic aftermath, and then ask the big one. Are we looking at a whole new set of global rules?
So let's get into it. To really get why this was such a big deal, we have to look closer at what happened. This wasn't some simple action. It was a complex flashpoint, a moment where totally different ideas about power and law just smashed into each other. We're going to break it down using three distinct lenses: legal, geopolitical, and what it means for the whole system.
At its very core, what we're seeing here is a head-on collision between two giant competing ideas. On one side, you've got this principle that's been around for centuries, Westphalian sovereignty. Basically, it means a nation is the boss inside its own borders, period. But then, crashing right into it, is this newer, much more aggressive idea, extraterritorial jurisdiction. That's the idea that one country's laws can reach out and grab someone outside its territory.
Okay, that brings us to the legal mess this created. In legal terms, this is what you'd call a hard case. It's a situation where two fundamental, rock-solid principles are staring each other down, and there's no way to make them both happy. International law, well, it just doesn't have a clean answer for this.
And this slide just lays out the clash perfectly. On one hand, you've got sovereign immunity. It's a cornerstone of diplomacy that basically says one leader can't just drag another into their core. But on the other side, you've got this pretty radical U.S. argument. They're saying the Maduro administration isn't a legitimate government at all. It's a transnational criminal organization, or a TCO. And if that's true, well, then all that immunity stuff just goes right out the window.
Now, this whole idea didn't just come out of nowhere. It's really a much bigger version of something called the Noriega model, which goes back to when the U.S. captured Panama's leader in 1989. See, the genius, or the danger, depending on your view, is how it's framed. By calling it an arrest for something like narco-terrorism, you're not calling it an act of war. It's a police action. And why does that matter so much? Because it's a clever way to bypass the UN Security Council, where Russia or China would almost certainly veto any military action.
Okay, so we've talked law, now let's shift gears and talk power. Because let's be real, beyond all the legal arguments, this was a raw, calculated show of force. A clear geopolitical statement.
There's actually a name for this kind of thing, a unilateral decapitation strategy. And yeah, it's as blunt as it sounds. It means one country, acting all on its own, decides to surgically remove the leadership of another country to get what it wants. And the key part is doing it without a messy, full-blown invasion.
So how do you actually pull something like this off? Well, let's look at the playbook for what was called Operation Southern Spear. Step 1. You send in your absolute best, your elite assets, like Delta Force. Step 2. Use precision strikes to keep a low footprint. No giant armies moving in. Step 3. Take out the leader, but without that ground invasion. And the result? Step 4. You minimize the political heat back home, and you don't break the bank. It's all about getting the biggest bang for your buck with the least amount of blowback.
And this is maybe the most important takeaway. The primary product here, it wasn't just getting Maduro. The real product was sending a message. A very loud, very clear message to every other leader on the planet. Your sovereignty might not protect you anymore. Not if a superpower decides its laws apply to you, wherever you are. Okay, on to our next section, the unstable aftermath. Because when you pull a piece like this off the board, it doesn't just leave a neat little hole. It creates a massive power vacuum. And vacuums, as we know, are incredibly dangerous.
There's a concept from systems theory that fits this perfectly. It's called a high entropy state. Think about it like this. When a central authority is in control, things might be tense, but they're relatively ordered. You remove that central point of control, you don't get a peaceful new order. You get entropy. You get chaos, things breaking apart, and just total unpredictability.
And this table does a great job of breaking down the ripple effects, the major risks. First, you've got the power vacuum inside the country. The whole Chavista power structure was built around one guy. You take him out, and it could splinter into a bunch of competing groups, maybe even leading to civil war. Then there's the global precedent. I mean, what's to stop other countries from saying, hey, that's a good idea, let's go arrest officials we don't like? And of course, you can't forget the markets. You just destabilized a major oil-producing nation. The shock to global oil prices could be huge.
And then there's the crisis on the ground, for the people themselves. You've created this deep social split. For some, this is liberation, right? The moment they've been waiting for. But for others, for Maduro's supporters, this is a foreign invasion. It triggers this intense reactive nationalism. And that creates a massive problem for whoever comes next. How can any new government be seen as legitimate when it looks like it was installed by an outside power?
So, let's pull all these threads together. What does it all mean? Well, this wasn't just a crisis in Venezuela. What we might be looking at is a fundamental rewrite of the global rulebook, a true paradigm shift.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. We could be watching the transition from a world governed by diplomatic immunity to one governed by criminal responsibility of state actors. Think about that. A world where being a head of state doesn't protect you anymore.
Which brings us to the final, and honestly, the most unsettling question of all. What happens now? Does an act like this actually pave the way for a stable democracy? Or has it just lit the fuse on a long, brutal insurgency that could destabilize the whole region for a generation? The answer to that question, well, it's going to define what the world looks like for a long time to come.